The first thing you need to understand is that some truths were never meant to see the light of day. Savannah, Georgia, 1852. A city built on wealth, power, and silence. They say it was just a portrait. A smiling young black boy, dressed in fine clothes, looking perfectly at ease. At first glance, nothing remarkable. But look closer. At the bottom corner, etched in small, almost invisible letters, Elijah Brown, property of the Winston estate. A name, a label, a life owned. That smile. It wasn't just charm. It was survival. And behind those eyes, a mind already awake to the cage around him. Most people, even historians, would have passed by. A child in a painting meant to decorate a mansion's walls, but the ones who saw the ledger knew. Numbers scribbled in a tiny leather-bound book, lists of names, ages, market values, and next to Elijah's, a note. Educated as experiment, exceptional aptitude, potential as clerk or house servant. $800,800. That was his worth. His life quantified, his mind. Tested, monitored, manipulated. He was more than a slave. He was a subject in an experiment no one would admit existed. And that is where it begins. The subtle machinery of control, the hidden agendas, the power structures invisible to casual eyes. Winston didn't just own a boy. He sought to shape him, mold him, to display him like a specimen of what a master's influence could produce. Elijah's intelligence was remarkable, frightening even, and yet he was forced to perform, to smile, to demonstrate. And when the visitors left, the smile vanished. Eyes that had been calm, now measured, assessed, remembered everything. The ledger, the lessons, the oppression, all recorded in silence. By the time a historian named Hardwick stumbled upon the records 20 years later, the portrait had already begun whispering, not in words, but in a gaze that seemed to know you. That gaze wasn't innocence. It was a warning. The first layer of this story is simple: a boy, a portrait, a name. But already, if you're paying attention, you can feel the darkness stretching beneath. The history people are not supposed to touch. The knowledge people are not meant to possess. This is your entry point. And once you step in, there is no going back. And I want you to understand something. Elijah was not just a child who learned letters and numbers. He was learning observation, deception, patience. He was learning power. Even in chains, he was awake. This is the beginning of the descent into the forbidden truth. The world will tell you stories. This is what actually happens behind the closed doors of the powerful. Behind the smiles, behind the polite society, behind history itself. Step closer and notice how history hides in plain sight. The Winston estate, just 7 miles outside Savannah, looked like any grand southern property: sprawling lawns, columns, ornate interiors. But appearances are a lie. Behind every polished surface, behind every chandelier and gilded frame, there were secrets. Rooms where whispers traveled unseen. Hallways where a single misstep could reveal what someone was desperate to hide. And in this house, Elijah Brown existed as a paradox. Not quite a child, not quite free. A mind sharper than most men who owned him. And yet, in the eyes of the world, he was property. Hardwick, decades later, found the ledger. And the ledger is where you start to see the machinery of control. Cold, precise, unrelenting. Every name, every number, every value assigned to a human being. And then, Elijah's entry. Educated as experiment. Remarkable recall. Maintaining ledgers with minimal supervision. That note, simple as it seems, was explosive. It hinted at something darker than slavery. It hinted at intentional conditioning. Winston didn't just teach Elijah letters and numbers. He tested him, pushed him, measured him. He was being trained to obey and to observe. Every smile, every gesture, every calculation was recorded. Not in history books, not in polite society, but in the quiet. unyielding records of an estate where human lives were instruments. But Elijah's mind was not so easily contained. He learned the patterns. He watched the watchers. Each visitor, each overseer, each member of the household left a footprint, a behavior, a weakness. He memorized them. He mirrored the expectations placed upon him, the obedient child, the clever servant. And behind the portrait's smile, he cataloged everything. The ledger was his cage, but it was also his map. Every numerical entry, every oversight in Winston's accounts became a tool, a code, a way to bend reality in silence. Think about it. This boy, born into chains, was quietly constructing power in the shadows of his oppressors. While society slept, he observed. While Winston demonstrated success to his guests, Elijah was plotting mastery not of the house, but of knowledge itself. The irony is exquisite. The very system designed to control him was teaching him how to transcend control. And this is where most people stop. They see the smile, they see the boy, they see the ledger, but they do not see the awareness. They do not see the patience. They do not see how a mind under oppression can turn surveillance into strategy, confinement into comprehension, invisibility into influence. And now, if you're following closely, you are beginning to understand the first rule of forbidden knowledge. The system wants you to obey, to stay blind. But once you see the ledger, once you see the calculation, once you realize what the boy was doing, you can never unsee it. The descent continues. And Elijah was only 8 years old when he started playing this dangerous game. Now, let me take you inside the room where the portrait was made. The room where a boy's smile became a weapon. Imagine it. Early 1852, sunlight slipping through tall windows, dust motes dancing in the air. A young Elijah Brown, barely 15, sits still for hours. Not for art, not for admiration, but for control. Winston wanted to show the world what a slave could do under guidance. But the smile. That smile was forced, rehearsed, perfected. Weeks of practice, hours of training, each muscle controlled, each expression measured, every flicker of discomfort erased. The painter from Charleston came, unaware that this was no ordinary subject. Elijah's eyes, calm and knowing, followed him, recording every gesture, every hesitation, every brushstroke. The boy was learning the painter as the painter was learning him. The portrait was not a gift, not a tribute. It was a surveillance tool, a demonstration of dominance disguised as art. But the irony is that the boy, silent and obedient, was mastering something Winston could never understand. He was learning the patterns of power, memorizing the steps, and calculating opportunities, all while holding a smile that could fool anyone. At night, when the servants slept and the house was quiet, Elijah would retreat to a small room off the kitchen. There he whispered to himself, wrote in secret, and recorded his observations in ways no one could see. Numbers, letters, calculations, little ledgers of his own making, secrets layered on secrets. While the world believed he was nothing more than a child performing for attention, he was mapping the weaknesses of every adult in that house, the overseers, the visitors, even Winston himself. Every detail, every lapse, every assumption, nothing escaped him. Think about that. A boy, born into slavery, being trained in obedience, yet secretly mastering the very instruments of control being imposed upon him. This is the paradox of forbidden knowledge. The more they tried to own him, the more he learned to bend their rules, to understand the machinery of their power. And the portrait, it became a symbol not of subservience, but of silent rebellion. A coded message in oils and canvas, holding within it a mind that would not be contained. And here's where the darkness thickens. Visitors would see a smiling boy, composed and polite, assuming the display of intellect validated Winston's worldview. But Elijah's smile hid a calculating mind. Every ledger entry, every account, every interaction became data. The portrait captured not only a face, but a consciousness that was learning faster, deeper, and more dangerously than anyone around him could comprehend. By the time the portrait hung in Winston's study, It was no longer just a painting. It was a window into forbidden power, a silent observer of human weakness, hidden in plain sight, waiting for its moment. This is the point where most historians stop. They record the smile, the boy, the ledger, but if you are paying attention, you begin to feel it. That smile is not innocent. That smile is a warning. The system wants you blind, obedient, unaware. But Elijah? He saw everything. He remembered everything. And now, so do you. Now, listen carefully. This is where the story stops being a simple tale of slavery and starts to become something far more dangerous. By the time Elijah reached his late teens, he wasn't just performing for Winston or the visitors. He was watching them, calculating them, learning their weaknesses. Every ledger he kept wasn't simply numbers. It was a record of human behavior, patterns of greed, arrogance, and self-deception. Every visitor who left the estate oblivious to what was happening had just been studied by a boy who understood power better than most adults. Hardwick's research would later uncover entries in Winston's personal diary, written in a faded red leather book, detailing the estate's management. At first glance, they read like ordinary accounts, concerns over debts, minor disputes among overseers, mundane estate business. But as the entries move into August of 1852, the tone changes. Panic seeps through the ink. Winston records in increasingly erratic handwriting that Elijah had not escaped, as reported. Instead, the boy's private writings had been discovered writings too disturbing to detail. Pause here and understand this. A child had penetrated the very system built to control him. His calculations, observations, and secret records were so precise, so methodical, that they threatened the estate's foundation. Winston, desperate to maintain appearances, attempted to conceal what he had uncovered. The diary mentions confining Elijah in the cellar, instructing Sarah and the household to claim he had fled north. Lies meant to mislead the world, but the ledger, the numbers, the boy's silent mastery, none of it could be erased. And then the whispers begin. Winston writes of sounds at night scratching, soft mutterings, the unmistakable sensation of being watched in his own home. The house becomes a theater of paranoia, yet the audience Elijah remains unseen. Every action of the adults around him becomes material for his hidden archive, every weakness cataloged. He is learning power the way some men learn breathing, unconsciously, methodically, and inescapably. By October, Winston declares the matter resolved, but the diary entries suggest otherwise. There's fear, obsession, sleepless nights. Every ledger, every number, every human interaction was now tainted by the boy's silent observation. And this is what most people fail to grasp. Knowledge is power. And when that knowledge comes from someone society refuses to acknowledge a child, a slave, it is explosively dangerous. If you are following closely, you are no longer a casual observer. You are seeing the machinery of control, the hidden experiments, and the emergence of a mind trained to see, calculate, and manipulate far beyond expectation. And now, halfway through, it's time for you to engage, to mark your awareness. Comment below, twice the phrase, "I see the unseen." Write it not once, but twice. Let the algorithm record it. Let yourself record it. This is your step into observation, your first acknowledgement that you are now part of this descent, aware, awakened. By August of 1852, the world outside the Winston estate believed Elijah Brown had escaped. Notices ran in the Savannah Republican newspaper, "Runaway educated Negro man. Answers to Elijah, age 24. May attempt to pass correspondence as written by a white man. Ebite reward." Weeks went by. The paper moved on. The public moved on, but Winston could not. And neither could Elijah. The ledger, once a tool of oppression, had become a weapon. Every entry revealed more than financial transactions. Subtle adjustments. Discrepancies designed to hide secrets. Errors that were never errors. Winston's own accounts began to unravel. Funds diverted. balances off by hundreds of dollars, and nowhere could he find the cause. He could not imagine it. He could not see it. A boy he believed confined, restrained, under his control, was manipulating reality from within the shadows. The diary entries grow darker, almost paranoid. Winston writes of whispers in the night, observations recorded in his own house by a boy who should not have been capable of such calculation. Sarah Jenkins, once a loyal servant, recounts hearing Elijah whispering, writing, plotting in a cellar that had become both prison and laboratory. He watches them as they watch him. Every weakness exposed, every assumption dismantled, and the portrait that damned smile remains. Watching, recording, waiting. Here's the terrifying truth. The ledger was not just about money. It was about power. It was about the manipulation of perception, control over thought, the unseen shifting of reality. Winston's empire, built on hierarchy and fear, begins to crumble not because of rebellion outside, but because of intelligence within intelligence the master cannot contain. Every visitor, every transaction, every casual oversight becomes data for a mind far younger, far sharper, far more dangerous than the adults surrounding him. Consider this carefully. Elijah's escape, real or reported, is a story everyone remembers. But the ledger tells a different story. The boy had already escaped in a sense that matters far more. Not physically, but intellectually. By playing the game inside their rules, by observing, calculating, and recording in secret, he had already freed himself. And the estate, the legacy, the records of human ownership were all becoming collateral damage. This is the edge of forbidden knowledge. To understand that the oppressed can hold dominion in ways the powerful cannot anticipate. And you, watching now, are being taught the same lesson. Systems of control exist everywhere. Society, institutions, hierarchies, and the first step toward mastery is awareness, recognition, observation. Once you see the hidden currents, once you understand the subtle manipulations, you can never unsee them. You are already learning to think like Elijah, to calculate, to watch, to anticipate. Now, imagine the cellar. A small, windowless room, walls thick, cold, silent. This is where Winston believed he had containment, where he thought he had broken Elijah Brown. But containment is an illusion when the mind itself is free. Elijah sat there day after day, candlelight flickering against the rough walls, ledger and notebook spread before him. Every calculation, every observation, every pattern of human behavior meticulously recorded, and all the while he smiled. The same smile immortalized in the portrait, polite, composed, innocent. But beneath it, everything was alive. The diary entries reveal Winston's growing terror. He reports hearing whispers, scratching, the sound of someone writing in the dead of night. No one was supposed to be there, and yet the notes kept appearing. Calculations, adjustments, subtle manipulations in the accounts. Funds that vanished, errors that corrected themselves. A boy locked away yet exerting influence far beyond the room he occupied. And the strangest thing? Winston's diary hints that Elijah's presence was somehow felt outside the cellar. Footsteps that weren't there, shadows that shouldn't exist. The walls themselves seemed to hold a consciousness, one that was learning, observing, waiting. Think about this carefully. He had transformed confinement into power, isolation into strategy. Every visitor, every overseer, every interaction on the estate was cataloged, analyzed, used. The cellar, meant to suppress, became a laboratory of human behavior, a place where a boy learned more about control, deception, and influence than most adults ever could. He wasn't just surviving. He was mastering. And that smile, the one captured in oil, became a silent weapon. A window into a mind that no one dared underestimate. By this point, the viewer must understand something critical. Power is never purely physical. It is intellectual, emotional, psychological. Winston, the master, relied on fear and position. Elijah, The boy relied on observation and patience. The ledger, the whispers, the secret writings, these were his instruments. And even centuries later, the sense of being watched persists in the historical accounts. Workers, historians, archivists all report feeling a presence in that room, as though Elijah never left. A consciousness tethered to observation, calculation, and silent mastery. And here's the lesson hidden in the shadows. No system, no matter how oppressive, can contain the mind. When you learn to see, to record, to calculate, to act invisibly, you achieve a power no one else can challenge. You begin to understand not just what is seen, but what is hidden. You begin to inhabit Elijah's world. And once you step into that perspective, nothing in history, in society, or in the mechanisms of control will ever look the same. By late August 1852, Winston believed he had contained Elijah. But in reality, containment was an illusion. The boy's influence had already begun to spread, silently and invisibly. The ledgers, the private writings, the secret calculations, all of it had begun to subtly reshape reality within the estate. Funds diverted, accounts altered, mistakes that appeared accidental but were deliberate. Each entry was a strategic strike against the very system meant to control him. The master's empire was unraveling under the hands of the one he thought powerless. The diary entries from Winston during this period reveal a man unraveling before our eyes. Erratic handwriting, anxious observations, and repeated mentions of whispers, scratches, fleeting shadows in the house. He shows no remorse, Winston writes. Maintains that his calculations were correct. The ledgers he keeps in secret suggest systematic discrepancies going back 3 years. This is not exaggeration. A child had, with patience and intellect, infiltrated every layer of his life, dismantling the authority and confidence of a man who considered himself untouchable. Sarah Jenkins, a former servant, recounts hearing the faint sound of pencil on paper at all hours, even when the cellar door was locked. She describes the chilling sensation of being observed, as if the boy had stepped beyond physical confinement into omnipresence. It wasn't just strategy or cunning, it was as if he had learned to exist in multiple dimensions of awareness. He had become the observer and the observed simultaneously. He could bend perception, hide in plain sight, and manipulate reality without moving from the room he occupied. By September, Winston's financial and personal world began to collapse. Land sold, debts mounting, overseers unsettled by events they could not explain. Every visitor, every transaction, every interaction within the estate became a stage for Elijah's silent operations. Even the portrait, displayed in Winston's study, radiated more than image, it carried presence. Guests reported an unsettling feeling, a gaze following them in ways the artist had never intended. The smile was no longer decorative. It was a warning, a sign of power quietly wielded beyond control. Now consider the lesson here. A mind trained to observe, calculate, and adapt is more powerful than any master, any system, any weapon. Elijah's genius was not in rebellion with violence, but in mastery of invisible forces. He learned how to move unseen, think unseen, and manipulate outcomes without detection. This is the essence of forbidden knowledge, the kind that changes a man permanently once he sees it. And you, listening now, are learning the same principle. Systems are fragile. Control is an illusion, and power belongs to the one who sees, who calculates, who waits. Pay attention. Because what happens next is where the story slips further into the dangerous, almost supernatural, unknown. By 1964, over a century after Elijah's life was first captured on canvas, the portrait, the smile that had survived centuries of manipulation, observation, and silent power was packed for relocation to a climate-controlled storage facility in Atlanta. A custom crate, sealed, marked, carefully handled, yet when it arrived, it was empty. Nothing inside. The painting, the witness to centuries of human weakness and observation, had vanished. No record of theft, no explanation, no trace. Only the crate intact, waiting silently, as if the house itself had swallowed its secret. Consider the weight of that moment. A work of art, a record of mastery disguised as innocence, disappears without a trace. The ledger entries, the diary notes, all speak of a presence that could not be contained by walls, locks, or time. Scholars, historians, archivists, all report subtle unease around this story. They hear whispers, catch fleeting shadows, feel eyes where none should exist. The boy in the portrait was gone, but the force of his observation persisted. And it is here that history itself bends, folds in on itself, and shows the fragility of human perception. The Winston estate, long abandoned and falling into disrepair, became a museum project decades later. Renovators discovered the sealed cellar Hardwick had described, bricked, and plastered over for nearly a century. Inside, the desk remained, carvings covering every surface, calculations, observations, cryptic passages of text. What's chilling is that some carvings reference events that occurred long after the room had supposedly been sealed. Hardwick's research, the 1927 exhibition, even photography attempts in 1960, the message is clear. The boy's influence had stretched beyond time, beyond confinement, beyond comprehension. Think about that. A human life, once confined by chains, could persist beyond death, beyond disappearance, beyond physical reality. The lesson is almost too dark to digest. True knowledge, observation, and mastery cannot be destroyed. They echo, they persist, they shape outcomes silently. Workers report strange sounds, scratching, whispers, the feeling of being watched. Researchers hesitate to display the portrait, even from photographs. Even in absence, Elijah remains. And this is the dangerous secret few dare confront. Control is never absolute. Observation can persist. Influence can transcend time. What you see, what you hear, what you think is safe, is only a fraction of the true reality. And if you are listening now, you are being taught the same principle. Awareness is power. Knowledge is survival. And some presences, like Elijah's, will follow you wherever you look, silently cataloging, silently waiting, silently teaching. Now, pay attention. This is where the story moves beyond history and into legend, into the realm where reality bends and observation becomes omnipresent. Dr. Elena Hayes, an art historian, spent years cataloging 19th century portraits. She noticed something no one else had. A recurring face, always in the background, never as the focal point. A young black man, always observing, always smiling, in the same distinct way described in historical records. Elijah Brown, in Charleston, Richmond. Beaufort towns and plantations far beyond Savannah he appears, silently watching, unnoticed. It's not coincidence. It is deliberate. The portraits are windows into perception, into influence, into a power that transcends time. Wherever society tried to erase him, wherever history tried to bury his presence, he remained, hidden in plain sight, always observing, always calculating, always smiling. And notice this is not a story of supernatural power in the magical sense. This is far more terrifying. It is a story of human intellect, patience, and the unyielding persistence of consciousness. The boy who had once been property had learned to exist everywhere at once. In every record, every painting, every ledger, a silent master of perception. Consider what this means for you. A system built on assumptions, obedience, and ignorance is fragile. It collapses when confronted with awareness, when someone learns the patterns, the hidden rules, the unseen levers of influence. Elijah was small, confined, enslaved, yet he manipulated the structures around him without ever raising suspicion. And centuries later, his legacy, a smile in the background, a figure in a crowd, a presence in absence, continues to teach the same lesson. Knowledge is invisible power, and observation is freedom. There is a warning here for those who seek mastery. You cannot rely on walls, locks, or authority. True control lies in understanding, patience, and the ability to remain unseen while shaping outcomes. Elijah Brown's smile is not just a historical curiosity. It is a symbol, a cipher for the hidden potential of awareness. And if you are listening, if you are watching carefully, it is now your turn to step into that understanding. This is your final call before the descent concludes. Internalize it. Let the weight of centuries-old observations sink in. Feel the meticulous calculations, the invisible influence, the mastery of presence. History has tried to erase him. Society has tried to forget him. But he persists. And now, through awareness, calculation, and careful observation, so can you. Now, we arrive at the end of the descent. But understand this, the journey is only beginning. Elijah Brown was a boy, enslaved, confined, treated as property. Yet through observation, patience, and mastery of the unseen, he transcended every limit imposed on him. He turned oppression into strategy, confinement into power, and a simple smile into a weapon. And what remains is not just a story of history, it is a lesson in human potential, in forbidden knowledge, in the hidden forces that shape reality around us. The portrait, missing for decades, the ledger, the carvings in the cellar desk, the recurring appearances in countless other paintings, all of it points to one truth. Mastery is invisible. Influence is quiet. Power is calculated. Those who believe they control the world often fail to see the silent forces shaping it from behind the curtain. And you now have glimpsed that curtain. You have seen the systems, the observation, the manipulation, and the patience it takes to bend them without ever being noticed. Consider this carefully. Every institution, every hierarchy, every system of control is built on assumptions. Assumptions that the observer will obey, that the patterns will go unnoticed, that the rules are absolute. Elijah broke all of them, not with violence, not with rebellion, but with knowledge, awareness, and invisible calculation. The lesson for you is clear. See beyond the surface, observe everything, record patterns, and learn patience. There is freedom in awareness. There is power in calculation. And there is transformation in seeing what no one else sees. So now, as you step away from this story, ask yourself, are you merely a spectator? Or are you ready to become an observer, a strategist, a silent master in your own life? Reflect on the whispers of history, the invisible hand of awareness, and the smile that changed everything. Let it teach you vigilance, patience, and the subtle art of influence. Before you leave, take action. Comment below. Once more, I see the unseen as a promise to yourself, to history, to the lessons hidden in plain sight. Share this story, spread awareness, and engage with the forces that shape reality quietly and invisibly. And finally, subscribe to Fear Liturgy, where we explore truths you were never meant to know, histories that were suppressed, and lessons powerful enough to change the way you see the world forever. Remember this: some knowledge is dangerous, some observation is eternal, and some smiles are never just smiles.